I'm Adrian Scarborough, and the name of my character is Leslie Bray in A True-Born Englishman. Well, it was written by Peter Barnes, and my character is a footman in Buckingham Palace, and he's risen through the ranks to the heady title of First Door Opener. He was originally Third Door Opener, but he's worked his way up. One of the things that appealed to me was the fact that the writing was fresh as a daisy, despite the fact that it's about 30 years old. And also, I'd not come across them before. And I'd not come across an awful lot of Peter Barnes' work before. So that is always lovely when one discovers somebody new. And it's also ever so slightly shaming because one feels that one should know him. I think one of the challenges of performing a monologue is the fact that it's all about you. So there's nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. It's about as exposing as it can be, really. That said, what's wonderful about it is, and equally as challenging, is the fact that you can kind of disappear into it in a way that you can't when you're on stage with other people. Because you're the only one to blame, really, if it goes wrong. I quite like that. They're mesmerizing if they're done well, I think. And it's storytelling, isn't it? Which is the joy of the monologue, is that hopefully behind it there's a ripping good yarn and a wonderful character telling it that you want to find out more and more about. The last time I was on stage was in November at the Nottingham Playhouse, in fact with Mark Gatiss. We did some short stories for November the 5th, sort of it was around Halloween. And obviously we had to do them with COVID restrictions upon us, but it was so wonderful, again, just to stand up and tell stories to a very, very wonderful and willing audience who were just so desperately happy to be out and to be in a group, despite the fact that they were miles apart from one another. And it was an incredibly charged evening. It was really, really rather wonderful. Prior to that, March the 16th, March the 13th, on the stage of the Wyndham's Theatre doing Tom Stoppard's new play Leopoldstadt. It's where you want to be, and it's, what makes you happy, ultimately. And I have to say, empty theatres are as atmospheric as full ones are. They're really, really highly charged places to be. But what's been lovely about this is working with lots of other people too, because that really has been a long time. I've spent an awful lot of time in a makeshift studio doing radio plays remotely on Zoom with people spread all over the country in a similar position, all in little cupboards under the stairs, surrounded by duvets and pillows. And entertaining as that was the first couple of times, it ain't quite the same as living, breathing tissue. They're just the loveliest, tastiest, most delicious stories. And they're as live as we can be at the moment. And seeing real actors doing what they're best at is just a thrill and a kick,